Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tower of Babble podcast. As always, I am Julian Musha. I'm joined by Jeremy Kozier. And we're going to be talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, the latest Marvel sensation. The biggest thing for Marvel since... what was the last big thing for Marvel? I guess Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, would you say was the last big thing? Or maybe Spider-Man? I don't even... how far back do we need to go? Well, no, I'm just saying, how far back do we need to go before, we had the last big one, is what I mean. Anyway. Because it was a flop, in your opinion? No, what? No, it didn't. I thought it went Spider-Man, then Doctor Strange, and then here we are. Anyway, we're just showing off our expertise. We're excited to get into this, but Jeremy, it's been a while since we've done anything that hasn't been a film club episode, or you haven't been involved directly in this, or Star Wars stuff. There's been lots of Star Wars, but Star Wars is on a break right now, partially because they don't usually go to Comic-Con, which is also happening right now. But also the Acolyte just wrapped up a couple weeks ago, and that means that Star Wars, small screen Star Wars, is on hiatus until the next big thing, or until we come up with another idea to do. So I guess the question is, Jeremy, what's new? What have you been up to? Have you added to your collections at all? Updated or gone back and watched any of the old X-Men movies, perhaps? What's the latest? You got it. You got to get. I did that last winter. Would you say that's close enough? That's soon enough? Recently enough? Okay. It felt like it to me. I had no desire to go back and watch 1 and 2 again 6 months later. So I went right into Deadpool 3, fresh enough. We'll get into that. Anything else going other than the Deadpool stuff? Oh, man, Jeremy. Actually, that's a good question. So here's a little pop quiz for you. When do you think the last time we did a just straight up movie review? But best guess, that was not a part of a film club or something else. No, it was June of last year for The Flash. We did a separate episode. This will be a separate episode as well for The Flash. No, I know. I'm just saying that when I'm thinking of we talk about the state of movies all the time, right? There's been a lot of movies that come and gone. Obviously, we talked about Furiosa. That was a part of a spin-out Dead Film Club episode. Still absolutely boggles my mind that movie didn't do better at the box office. It's a shame. We'll talk about how well Wolverine and Deadpool are doing, or Deadpool and Wolverine. I always want to put Wolverine first. Is that do you think that's like a Freudian slip, or what do you think? What do you think I keep doing that? But you just know the title. You would never make that mistake. Yeah. Okay. Just checking. Perfect. Always perfect. I'm just saying that yeah. Jeremy. To be honest, if we had a soundboard, it'd be 90% Dumb and Dumber, and then 5% Austin Powers, and then the rest would just be random stuff. Anyway, I said all this stuff, this preamble stuff, because obviously Marvel has decided that they needed to cut back on the amount of stuff they're putting out. They felt like they're diluting the pool, right? And because of that, we only got this one Marvel movie this year. And last year, I think, what was it, 2 we got last year? Neither of them particularly successful. So, they even make jokes about it in Deadpool and Wolverine about, hey, you were joining at a low point. That being said, how just to kind of tee this up a little bit, where were you on the MCU coming into Deadpool and Wolverine? Take yourself back. Ant-Man and yeah. Why would you would Doctor Strange? Mm-hmm. So yeah, are you talking about like the trailer for Venom 3? That's absolutely unhinged. Or are you talking about? Man, I don't. It's she's a big horse person. No, that's funny. Sorry. Um, just wasn't it? You weren't in like you weren't in a buzz like we were like in the Avengers time. Sure. Mm. Yeah, I that formula seems to be kind of what they leaned on for Deadpool or Deadpool 3 or Deadpool Wolverine anyway. What do you want to call it for? I'll just call it Deadpool 3 for to shorten up the syllables. Um yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get like to me it feels like there's a bit of a formula here in terms of like what were the movies that were popping. Um you know, I still think, largely speaking, people look at Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness largely positively. I don't remember what its box office haul was, but it wasn't a complete flop, if I recall. It was like middling numbers. Yeah, right. Yes, yeah, they had that was the sequel, but I guess Doctor Strange was a big part of both the the Avengers Endgame stuff. Yeah. Um, that being said, the formula seems to be with since they started this multiverse stuff, which has been very referential, right? Leaning on the nostalgia, right? And then drawing from that history of like pre MCU Marvel to kind of fill out some of the spaces or pieces in the MCU, and I think that's fair to say for Deadpool 3. They do a lot of the same. The shtick is the same. It works better as a part of a Deadpool movie than it does as a part of Doctor Strange. And Spider-Man works pretty good because I think between Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse and all the Spider-Man stuff we've got over the years, that it just feels it fits a little bit better. So I'm not saying that it does that it's like it's bad. I don't think that at all. That being said, you can't do it for every movie, and what we've seen is that the movies that aren't doing that aren't working. But I think there's other reasons for why that's happening. Largely, I think I don't think this is fair, but people have said like, "Hey, maybe we should stop having Rick and Morty writers write our Marvel movies." I don't think that they are specifically to blame, though. I will say that the Rick and Morty-ness of like really almost too fast of pacing, of referential or kind of like playing on tropes concepts at like rapid pace is exhausting after a while. Is my kind of sense of that. So, where was I coming into Deadpool 3? Anticipation wise and hype wise, I was very hyped. Obviously, Return of Hugh Jackman, obviously very exciting. Um, I'm middling on the Deadpool movies. I think I've cooled on them more over time. The Marvel stuff, I don't think is yet to get to the point where it feels like a chore. I have enjoyed watching the shows. I've watched all the MCU shows on Disney Plus. Lo- all of them, every single one, all the main ones. Anyway, I don't know if there's like which one do you think I haven't watched? I watched Secret Wars. I no. Okay, sorry. I enjoyed the experience of having a Marvel show to watch. That's the, let me yeah, but I will say yes, those not all those shows have worked. Loki was really good. Secret Wars was or Secret Invasion, sorry, um, was a low point for sure. Sure. Right, but I guess what I'm saying is that we came from a world in the prior to Endgame Marvel world where every movie was almost a hit, with very few exceptions, right? No, I get that. What I'm saying is, but what you're saying is, it's like, well, we've now transitioned to this part where like you don't have to see everything; you just tune into the stuff that's most interesting to you. But mm, well, then what do you think has motivated? If you acknowledge that there is a distinction between like what was happening before and what's happening now, why then? Like, what? How did we get here? Just dilution again? Like, just too much bad stuff, or it wasn't a great movie. Mm, sure. So I guess the question would be: would you have been in the theaters Thursday night and Friday night, like I was with you, um, if this was just Deadpool 3, no Hugh Jackman, no Wolverine? Where I guess like try to try to play that what if for me. Right. Okay. Development, change. Yeah. Right. Okay. That's fair.
It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like Hugh did a favor to Ryan and everyone else just to kind of show up. Like that's what it is.
You, is that the sense you're? I mean, you told me that you've watched like every interview and like
Yeah,
featurette and stuff that they were doing.
pretty much.
So
Some of the
is that the vibe that you got, that he was like, okay, you've been bugging me with this
he
long enough, I'll do it.
basically like he just showed up and just did and just performed like it wasn't like a phoning in or anything, not even
No,
close.
no,
Like
I'm not saying that. I'm not
it's
saying that.
like
I'm just saying
just
what motivated him.
really good stuff. Like I noticed it more the second time around. Um, just like he's just so good. Like he's just no denying it.
Well, I mean, he
But
he's a
the
great
thing is,
actor.
the
I mean, it's true.
disappointing thing, with our two takes or whatever, or two viewings plus two separate takes, similar, whatever. Um, it's that it was just kind of disappointing that there wasn't something leading anywhere new or showcasing something from before that's new. It was just it's the Wolverine. You're seeing him in all
Right.
his glory. He was always the wrong guy until he isn't, which is just that means he's Wolverine, right? Doesn't matter that he failed his world or whatever. Like he is, like that's just who Wolverine
Right.
is. We get to see that, throughout this whole thing. It just kind of smattered with the swearing and banter with Deadpool, which is kind of what a lot of fans want. It just, I think to us, it felt a little bit too much of that.
Just a little hollow to me, and that's kind of how it came down. I
Right, but that's
pretty
the
much agree with
beginning
you. Yeah.
fun parts of it, right? Like it's like, I don't know. I think the first hour and so is just really good. Um, like even leading up to that, their first fight sequence, like
Mm-hmm. I'd agree. Yeah.
the how he talks to the audience. It's like, hey, get ready, and then we have like a super long fight sequence. That's
Like the
pretty
opening
crazy.
credits.
No, no,
You
no.
mean?
The when they actually battle each other.
Oh yeah, when they fight each other. Yeah. No. Yeah.
The
I
opening
mean,
credits actually might be some of the best opening credits I've seen in a while. It's like
hmm,
super engaging, looks really good. The
fun
music is super
idea.
funny.
Yeah.
Classic, like just like Deadpool straight from the comic, just dancing, being cute or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And the music's obviously just hype. Everyone knows Backstreet Boys. And it's so funny too because the whole thing, like the very first video of the announcement of this movie, when it's Ryan and Hugh kind of talking on the couch, he's
Yes.
like, Logan's a masterpiece, we're not touching that. And then like we kind of just like accept that, and like that's like kind of the
Right.
twist advertisement going into the movie,
Well,
like,
I feel like you think at that point they already knew that that was what they were doing. I feel like there was a probably an acknowledgement that they like didn't want to mess with Logan, but
yeah,
then realized that it was
there's
a
no
low
way
hanging
around it.
fruit. Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
they went so deep into it, like to where my point is, like there he's literally fighting all these goons or whatever with the skeleton, the
Yes.
adamantium skeleton
Yes.
of Logan, basically, which is
It,
just wild.
it's very cool.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yes. I mean,
And then
let's
gets to use the
okay.
claws and just a brilliant Deadpool and Wolverine like logo, like this is the movie, and like
Yeah.
it's not Hugh, it's not Wolverine per se there, but it's Deadpool wearing the claws, which is like so brilliant in my mind because like he's just like
Just
playing
share
with
the
that
glory a
fantasy in
bit.
his head, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
he's psycho.
But also it's like who wouldn't want to wear the claws, you know? It's a power
Yeah,
fantasy that everyone would
but
want,
it's
you
not
know.
even. But it's also like if you found a skeleton, you wouldn't necessarily think there would be even like a thought that you could wear the claws. You would just be like,
No,
oh.
no, and it probably
But they
wouldn't
do it
work
pretty.
that way,
They do
but
it
it's
clever here, where he kind of put
yeah.
them on.
Yes. Um and then as soon as you saw him putting them on, you're like, "Oh shit," right? To the point where people in my theater were like literally there was a guy, I don't know, 3 or 4 seats to my left, like dead center front back row of the front section of the our Limax screen here, and
Ugh.
he was like he was literally, and people say I was on the edge of my seat. He was literally on the edge of his seat, leaning forward. This is like a 40-year-old man, and he yelled "fuck yeah" when that happened. Um, and hey, more power to him. I say I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum, but that is the vibe that I think they were trying to go for, and I think they achieved it. Okay, so let's hold on. Put a pin in that 1 second. There's a little bit of housekeeping. So, just a quick reminder for anyone listening: we do record these live. That being said, this is a Sunday afternoon. We don't always record Sunday afternoon. We don't really have a set schedule. I know that can be frustrating for some people. I apologize, but given the nature of our day jobs and whatnot, it's just hard to stay. It's just hard to nail down. So, what I would say is there's an easy solution to that. It's subscribe to Tower Babble on Twitch and YouTube. So it's twitch.tv/Tower Babblecast. And same thing, if you go to youtube.com/Tower Babblecast, you'll get to the same place. If you subscribe to those, you'll get notified when we go live, and then that you can just join the conversation. We always keep an eye on the chat, and that's always a fun time when we have kind of a community-based discussion happening at the same time. So that's number one. Number two, pleased to meet you, number two. Patreon. If you want to help support the show, you're like, you've been listening for a long time, you've been trying to find something a way to support us or to give us a little bit more love. I understand. I would feel the same way. Head over to patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to our monthly film club, which is an exclusive. This month, we'll be doing Twister, obviously in honor of Twisters, which I have yet to see, but I'll be seeing in theaters probably this coming week. We'll be recording that Twister conversation sometime in the next few days, and it'll be going live exclusive to patrons before the end of the month, as long as everything goes according to plan. On top of that, you get access to our Discord. If you are listening to this right now and you're a Patreon subscriber, you can actually ditch the YouTube, ditch the Twitch, go over to Discord, and you get the behind-the-scenes experience. minus the video. I have yet to figure out the video side of that. But you get to join the TOB recording studio. Obviously, you don't get to talk in there unless we invite you in. But you can listen to the podcast being recorded and some a little pre and post amble stuff. So that's the housekeeping. Right now, in terms of like the plan going forward, you might be thinking, okay, well, Star Wars, small screen Star Wars just wrapped up. Rachel's gonna go take care of her kid for a little while. I'm gonna continue looking for work. Where does that leave the show? Great question. As I said before, with small screen Star Wars on hiatus, we have lots of time to do more traditional stuff. It was last June when we covered The Flash. We're doing Deadpool and Wolverine right now. There's going to be other things we're going to be talking about. There's obviously stuff from Comic-Con that's worth covering, Marvel-related nonetheless. And so there is actually quite a lot that we can talk about. And I am endeavoring to, not maybe weekly, because that was what we were doing with Small Screen Star Wars, covering the weekly releases, but probably closer to a bi-weekly format, back to the regular Tower of Babble podcast format, covering a little bit of nerd news, reviewing more current films separate from the film club. So just keep an eye out for that. And obviously, if you have any questions, towerofbabblepodcast@gmail.com, or hit me up on Discord, and we can hash it out. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the anticipation. Quick question before we get into the nitty gritty here, Jeremy. Not that we haven't a little bit already. Having just watched the previous two Deadpool movies, where does this one land for you in context with the other two? Obviously, this one joining the MCU is kind of the thing about it. The previous two really played on the our X-Men universe, or kind of Fox X-Men universe understandings. How does it work for you? I think you mentioned earlier that you feel like it works better now, but give me your 411 here.
Yeah, I just really like that we have a Deadpool trilogy, and all of them are so different and have different directors, but obviously share so much similarities and through lines with characters.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think they all represent a unique flavor, and it's just so cool that you can kind of just dive into the world of Deadpool, in live action cinematically, and it's such a cool kind of progression as it's from first, second to third, and just so cool that it's joining the MCU in this third iteration, and there's a ton of surprises here that it's almost like your expectations lead you to want more, or kind of make your mind wander with more X-Men characters, but
Mm-hmm.
the ones that we did get really played into a really funny gag, specifically with one of the characters, which isn't really a return, but just kind of seeing him in that form, referring to Gambit essentially.
Right.
But,
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get into that. That's so funny. I guess. Yeah. Quick note here. It's impossible to talk about this movie without spoilers, so we're just going to do that. This is spoiler zone. Anything that's happened in the MCU, anything that's happened in any of the Deadpool movies, and everything that's happened in Deadpool and Wolverine is on the table. We're going to talk about all of that. Yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of how liking the uniqueness between the Deadpool movies. The first one was kind of like miracle that ever happened. The leak of the test footage and all that kind of stuff. That's become like Marvel lore, right? It's kind of like the great what if that we actually got to have happen, right? And so that's fun. Even from that first movie, right? They were already playing on the whole Wolverine, Hugh Jackman concept, and that followed through every movie. Obviously, and kind of hit a crescendo here. That being said, having gone back and watched them last winter, my feelings on the Deadpool movies are that they are very entertaining when you're watching them. But at the same time, I find it's just a little stupid. And I think that's fine. I'm not saying that as necessarily a bad thing, but it does start to grate on me after. If you watch them all back to back, I watched Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 one day apart, I just felt like maybe this is just too much of the same thing. They obviously didn't come out that way. I wouldn't even necessarily recommend watching them that way, um, because it will all kind of blend together in your head. Because again, Deadpool as the character, as played by Ryan Reynolds, he's really doing the same shtick, in every movie. He's actually really doing the Ryan Reynolds shtick, which he's been doing ever since Van Wilder. But it works for the character.
Into it for this character.
Yeah, it's like this is this first chance to Deadpool was really the first chance where he kind of got to fully embrace that side of his personality, and it massive for him. You know what I mean? Like I don't think. Would you agree, or do you think it's fair to say that Ryan Reynolds' career wouldn't be what it is now without the Deadpool movies?
I don't know. I think he's got a lot of roles.
Sure, but I think he was seen as that rom-com artist for a while, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but you're not reaching movie star level probably in the year of our Lord 2024 in that type of space. So I think and obviously he had a few flops, Green Lantern being the most famous of that. Jeremy, here's a question: as someone who's a massive Green Lantern fan, not the movie but the character, are you tired of them bashing on that movie? Are you over that? I feel like I'm a little over it.
Was there more bashing in this time around?
Yeah, it's continued in both interviews. He was asked if he'd watch it again. He said that he'd rather watch a marathon of Paw Patrol than ever watch Green Lantern again. Which is it's like all the answers are always very funny. Obviously, in Deadpool 2, he shoots himself in the back of the head while he's reading the Green Lantern script.
Hilarious.
There's a joke in the first one.
We see that in this movie, yeah. You see a brief glimpse of that, and I laughed when it happened. I'm not like...
No, I get that.
I have no...
I just think it's like, it feels to me like it's kind of like over-treaded. Like, we get it. You didn't think that movie was executed well, yada, yada. It just... Maybe it's easy for them because it's DC, so it's a good opportunity for them to make fun of DC in like a very meta way, right? Instead of the way that they used to do it in the 90s, where they would just invent the same character, like Slade Wilson, Wade Wilson, like they would do stuff like that, and that would be their way of like hitting back at DC, and Marvel would do the same thing. And now it's just you can just do whatever you want, obviously, including having Henry Cavill in your movie. But I don't know. For me, it's just like, okay, we get it. You didn't like that movie. It's not nearly as bad as like there's way worse movies than the Green Lantern movie, and though it's not that great. I think so, 100%.
Like
I would say Conspiracy Theory is a worse movie than Green Lantern. I don't know. Maybe that's not very fair. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. But yes, I think that's fair to say. It's not. It doesn't deserve as much hate as it continues to get over and over and over and over and over again. I lost my train of thought. I guess where do you want to start here? We were talking a little bit about what worked, what didn't work. Let's start with what worked. Jeremy, is there anything that jumps off the page in terms of obviously talked about the Deadpool stuff, the swearing, the violence, all that, the kind of silliness of it. I think that all relatively works. I was saying to you in the lobby of the theater while we were coming out of the Thursday show that like I was pleasantly surprised because, as I just mentioned, I was cooling a bit on the Deadpool thing as just kind of being a little bit too stupid or a little bit too easy, right? The jokes would be like, aren't dicks and balls funny and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of funny sometimes, but they would pleasantly surprise me in this movie by taking the joke that one next half step forward to be like, oh, I wasn't expecting that to be the punchline, and that works for me. So they were a little bit more clever than I anticipated, which is a good thing. It was really fun seeing the surprises, the ability to keep those a secret, despite having been spoiled on one of them, on the Henry Cavill one, was disappointing. But largely speaking, that wasn't even a big deal. Everything else totally worked way better anyway from a cameo or surprise perspective. So I really like that stuff. I don't want to get into the things that didn't work for me yet, but I also liked the connections into Loki and the everything to do with the TVA. I think the style of the TVA is fun. I think the use of like these time cops essentially is a fun concept. I think all that stuff works well, even though it introduces all sorts of confusing things that you're best not to think about. It's just comic book logic, so just bear with us is kind of really what the movie's doing, and that's fair. Um, so generally speaking, I liked it. I would give it like if I had to give it a number, which I don't normally do, but I would give it like a 7.5 out of 10. Would be like where I would land. So Jeremy, what's your overall thoughts? What worked for you?
uh, just it's just like um, just so entertaining, like kind of like throughout. Like obviously, like
Totally.
you alluded to like pacing or whatever, but I think just in these multiverse movies, like pacing's always gonna be pretty snappy, pretty quick. Get a lot of characters. So I think all of that really worked and just kind of blended well together. It wasn't like, oh, should have spent more time here or there. I was honestly just kind of laser focused on Wolverine, uh, just like kind of just sitting on every word, and it did become a little like when's it gonna develop into something more? You know what I mean? Because like
Yes.
every time they would talk, he would just basically say like "fuck you" or
Or
whatever,
shut up.
which is
Yeah.
cool to kind of get this like unleashed because he is like this unleashed, Hugh Jackman Wolverine,
Yeah.
like just thrown into the scenario. And it's I guess my expectation just kind of like waiting for him to like do something like I don't know, like extraordinary
And do
or
you feel like that ever happened? Because I don't feel like that ever happened really. The coolest part is when
no. I think I've kind of accepted that like he was just there to be this unleashed Wolverine that kind of reminded you of who Wolverine is as a character.
right.
Um, and he shows up. You know what I mean? Like the whole ending sequence with the Like a Prayer song, like the choir version,
Mm-hmm.
and just like the flashback through Deadpool's life and kind of his story.
Yeah, I think that's effective.
I think all that is like very effective. Like
Mm-hmm. I agree.
it's like holy cow. Like I think for us, like we were still kind of sour on the reveal of the cowl,
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
leading
We're
into
just
all of that.
distracting a little bit at that point in the
Right.
movie. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, but some of that, like when they're just like underground there and they're kind of like, they have that discussion, like who's going to be the guy to like sacrifice himself. It's like, it's pretty remarkable to see,
Yeah.
to just see Hugh in the cowl, just nailing the voice and these lines. Um, or even when he puts the cowl on, like what's the line? He's like,
Mostly
um,
for what do you wear that for
mostly
special
for
occasions? Mostly for
mostly for
killing.
killing. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's just Wolverine at his peak, you know what I mean, in those moments. And I think us just being so like, analyzing kind of everything, I think it was kind of washed away a little bit the first viewing, and the second one I was able to kind of just really take it all in and just and everyone we talked to, right, they basically really enjoyed it. So
Yeah. I
I think I
yeah.
think I come down around on there with it. It might be a little bit biased towards kind of my expectations and what I'm hoping for these characters, but yeah, I would say eight or nine for sure. But then it's
Okay.
like then we go into like like when Blade is revealed, and it's like
Oh, the coolest.
Jesus
It's the coolest.
effing
It
Christ.
it plays that like tiger sound. It's like
Yeah,
and you're
that
like,
is
"Oh,
that
sick."
is one of the most genuine surprise because the
Yes.
cameos, right? Like the
Right.
joke, like with multiverse movies, we're kind of sick of it.
Yes.
Like it's kind of true. It's like there aren't really very many cameos where you're like, oh, like that one was like, no way,
Yeah.
like
Well,
no
mostly because I was like,
effing
I forgot
way.
that he was out of prison.
Yeah. Well, there's all these
Yeah.
stories, narratives about him, and just, like they play on the relationship with him and Ryan, obviously, and they
Yes.
they joke about it within the movie, but like,
From
clearly
Blade
that's not the
3.
case if they're
Yeah.
both in the movie. But then also like they double down on him, and he has like very good choreographed action, like
Yes.
multiple, like I want to say like three or maybe four like really tight little sequences, and it's like Jesus Christ, this guy. It's Blade. Like he can
Well,
still. It doesn't look like he lost a
it's
beat at
so
all.
cool because I think he has just magnetic screen presence. Like as soon
Right.
as the camera's on him, you just can't stop looking at Wesley Snipes.
Right.
You just can't do it. And like
Just
even when he's
unbelievable.
like doing stuff
Guy's in
like
his 60s.
he's like the gray hair is a cool touch. And like so even when he's like I can't remember what the exact line it is, but he's not even doing anything action related. He just pulls his sword out and he's like, I'm in. And it's like,
61.
okay, so sick. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, everything about it. I couldn't believe how well they did it. And it's like, then like, oh yeah, Ryan was in
It makes sense. Yeah.
the third Deadpool movie, and it's like you get all these little meta nods and winks. The Jennifer Garner one, I think that was leaked a while ago, but
It doesn't.
still pretty cool.
Is it?
For the
Is it
well, I mean,
though?
she does get like both times a gasp and like
I
there she
guess. I
is.
don't know. I
So
don't
like
think anyone.
you're coming. Well, she had one movie, dude.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
then
she was
there you go.
in.
Sure.
She was in 2 movies. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's two, but it's basically like 1.5 movie, basically.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's not like they're not saying like, oh, Electra, like that was so exciting that movie from before. No one's saying that. It's just Jennifer Garner is a celebrity, like a
Yeah. Fair
A-lister.
enough. Yeah.
And it's just kind of yeah. So then so to me, it's like it's Wesley Snipes is like a legitimate, pound for pound, one of the greatest cameos of all time,
Sure.
if not number one. Just the shock value alone, and then his
Yeah.
performance.
So
Jeez
sick.
Louise.
Mm-hmm.
And then Electra's kind of like that jokey, like in the middle ground, kind of. And then they lean even heavier into that with
The jokes. Yeah.
with
Channing Tatum.
Channing Tatum,
Yeah.
which is just absolutely because he's the polar opposite of what Blade is trying to do. Even
Man,
though
it's
Blade's
so
humor is like that.
fucking funny. I just don't understand why everyone wasn't just dying laughing every time he spoke.
Well,
It's
I think
so
it was, I think it was
hilarious.
slightly confusing in the beginning that like they like kind of with like how Marvel costumes are and whatnot.
Sure.
Like, I think they just thought like that's there's peak Gambit. Like, oh yeah,
Well,
you know what I mean. But
they're
then
just
like
doing
to
they're doing the
us,
cartoon, right?
yeah, to
That's
us,
yeah.
well, yeah, which is the comic, which is the
Sure.
the
Yes.
character.
Yeah.
But like just to have that one for one look, it's like that's not how it kind of transitions.
You
into
would
live
never if you were gonna make an
It wouldn't-
actual Gambit
yeah.
movie, it
You
wouldn't
have
look
a
like
plastic cowl. It would be
that.
cloth.
No, you would not. No, you
So
would
and like
not.
it wouldn't be all shiny. Like so, like
Oh, it's so
I think
funny.
I
Yeah.
think that maybe that was lost in translation for some audience members. But if it was, it doesn't matter because you're
Right.
just like in awe that like Gambit is there.
It
But then it's Channing Tatum's performance,
right,
with
which is
the
hilarious.
dialogue being hit and miss, but
Yeah.
mostly misses, but on purpose.
Like
Is
even
just
if it's
brilliant.
not on purpose, so like
Well,
the
we know that
attempt
it is because
right.
Deadpool, he's like, "Who is your dialect coach?" or whatever.
yeah, right. It's
So
good.
it kind of cues the audience in on the joke
Well,
if they missed
I
it already.
was apparently I saw a little bit of this on Twitter, which is like apparently when he was originally cast, one of the challenges that they were having was they couldn't really nail the voice. Like that was a challenge that they were working through. So even that might be in and of itself a meta piece of meta
I
comedy.
just see it as like we're gonna have all like you got to think of the mind of Deadpool, right? Basically Ryan writing it like, who are we gonna bring back that's gonna like wow the audiences or whatever. And
Sure.
it's like it's a joke to bring quotes back Channing Tatum. So
Yeah,
they went
it's great.
full in on comic accuracy, which makes it a complete like joke.
So
like a
it's
clown.
the whole thing is hilarious
And
to
then
me.
he clowns the acting and then the lines.
It's
So
easily
just,
to me the funniest part of the movie. Like it's not
Yeah.
even close in my
like
opinion.
laugh
And like
out, like you have to laugh out loud. He has
yeah, right.
many lines.
And I will say this: the music that they like, I think it's a part of the score, but like this whip sound effect that they have, and then at the moment that that he's introduced, that Gamma's introduced, right after Blade, in slow motion, it's so cool. Like again, I think it's funny, and like the way that they do it is like played straight, but that's what makes it funny. Especially after like you're not laughing at Blade. You're like, that's so cool. Everything
Right.
about him is cool. And then you then you have Gambit, and even though the music's badass, I loved it, and I was hyped. I just like
Promo.
it's just so funny.
Yeah.
So that was like a real high point for me. in
Right,
the
and it's
movie.
wild how they're able to nail like the tone within each cameo there, and then treat them all differently. So no respect to Gambit because there's no history or anything there.
Right.
It's just all for jokes. And then with Elektra, there's obviously some sweet choreography and some fight moves, but especially Blade just gets like a mini movie within
Hmm.
this and reminds
Well,
us that like holy shit. And then his line too, like where's the
it's
other?
only
There's
one
gonna be
blade.
five blades. There's only ever gonna be one blade.
Oh, there's never gonna be one blade.
Like
Yeah, it's
just
sick.
brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Um, they mentioned Punisher a bunch of times. I kind of wish Punisher was in this. I feel like it would have fit well having a
Mm.
Punisher in here. Any of them, really, to be honest, would have worked. Um, so I think that's a good high level, high point here with those cameos. My biggest gripe with this movie, though, and I think it's tough because on one hand, these Deadpool movies aren't really designed like normal movies are. They're not. It's not a normal movie, which makes them kind of critic proof because you can't go in and say, "Oh, well, it doesn't have a traditional, beginning, middle, end, traditional story structure. Um, it doesn't really have traditional characters, so it becomes this, it's. I would argue it's essentially, and maybe Jeremy, this is way out of left field, but and I just came up with this, but these Deadpool movies are essentially what like the scary what movies were to horror movies and slasher movies were in like the early 2000s to what comic book movies are now. Remember there was that one attempt to do the superhero movie version of that. It was a complete flop, and I think it was straight to DVD or whatever. But that's what they're doing here for all intents and purposes. It's not quite as like pure comedy, Austin Powers style, like referential humorous stuff, or cutaway stuff like we sometimes saw in some of those movies. But it's basically that, which again, that's fine. But my problem is when you name the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, what I would hope for, and what I was hoping for, was a more flushed out character dynamic between, and you touched on this a little bit about like it's just a lot of them swearing at each other, and that's fine. But they're really like Wolverine's essentially a sidekick in this movie. And yes, they spend a lot of time together, but so much time is given to these cameos and these references and these jokes that there's like no time left in the movie for there to be an actual relationship developed between Wade and Logan. And there is a payoff at the end of like, hey, you made the educated wish or whatever, which is a fun through line. But it does feel a little hollow to me because
what kind of emotional relationship
any
are
kind
you
of relation.
expecting
They barely have a conversation that's deeper than "fuck you, shut up." That's most of the movie.
But like,
So
what would be there that like is an emotional like thing between those two characters? Like, isn't it just Deadpool? Like, he's just so unabashedly like in love with like all like Marvel heroes to a certain degree, right? Like he's talking about Thor
sure,
the whole movie, that whole joke, and like Wolverine's just been his dream kind of guy.
right. So
And then
talk
we
to
get
him
it,
more.
but then we just get to see the typical. It's like, well, they come to the understanding, just like planes, trains, and automobiles, right? It's like Martin hates what's his name, the whole fucking movie
Right.
because he's just
Yeah.
annoying.
John Candy.
And then but then he just feels sorry for him because it's like, hey, well, he means well and he's alone.
His heart's in the right place.
So
That kind of thing.
but that's all they're based, and that's that whole like experience is what they're replicating here, and you're here to say that like, well, I didn't necessarily feel that transition or that revelation.
Yeah.
But it's
I
like
mean, it didn't land for
I
me.
think what they did was they just kind of dove into Hugh Jackman and just kind of his psyche, not being fit for duty Wolverine, using his family around him, X-23, and then
Sure.
Deadpool to a certain degree, and then just coming together in the end and like just fighting side by side, and yeah, like
It
that's
just feels a
basically
little
what it
rushed,
was.
and it's a little. And again, it feels like the trade off was humor and by the way, relying on the emotional baggage and weight that we bring in to the movie around Hugh Jackman. They let that do. It's like it's a shortcut for them in the movie to say, no, this isn't the Hugh Jackman Wolverine that you know. We made that very clear at the beginning. He's dead, right? This is a different Wolverine, but they still use almost all of the same like shortcuts basically that you could use with the original Wolverine, but you can only do that because it's Hugh Jackman. So it feels a little disjointed in that way to me because you almost want to develop a little bit more uniqueness to this Wolverine. But at the same time, you can't because you need to rely on all of these like past, again, the things that we carry about our understanding of Wolverine, and even the point where it gets confusing if the emotional beat that they're trying to land with Wolverine, when he's having his mind invaded, whatever, right, by Kane, that his trauma is that he left that he was like he wasn't a team player, right? This is classic Wolverine stuff, right? Wasn't a team player, wasn't there when the humans came and they killed all the X-Men, right? And he blames himself, which is not exactly what happens in Logan, but it's like another like, oh, I'm the last X-Men left, and using that like what we think of when we think of Jean, and we think of like Famke Janssen, and we think of Cyclops, and we think of what's his name, and like I think they clearly want us to think those things, but it feels like a cheat code a little bit to be able to use Hugh Jackman here to emotionally load those scenes, which are great, but feel so disconnected from the rest of the movie because Logan doesn't really have catharsis with any other characters until the very, 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 very end of the movie. So I don't know. The problem to me is that this movie is full of a bunch of caricatures and no real characters, including Logan, who is not a complete character here because it's relying too much on our previous understanding of Logan from his previous appearances versus establishing, why we should care about this Logan, and even why he should care about Deadpool, because that's fairly poorly explored also. So that's my biggest gripe with this movie, which is why I dock it the 2.5 points. if we're gonna go on the point scale, but does that make sense, or am I talking out of my butt? Oh, Jeremy, to lose you? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Yes,
hear
I can hear you now.
Oh, yeah.
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it kind of it's like inseparable though, like the notion of Hugh and like that history and that buildup of him wearing the suit. Like I think you know who he is already. You know what I mean? Like it's not trying to stand alone.
Sure.
So I think that's the only problem you run into with that, I guess.
Well, I think it compounds for me because like even with Blade and all the cameos, all of them, including Johnny Storm and all that stuff, none of them are characters, and you really the only character in this movie is Deadpool, like a fully fleshed out character, because even his ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, is barely in the movie. She's in like 3 scenes in the movie, and the rest of her are all mostly flashbacks. So, Marina Baccarin, who I think is a great actress, and I do think they have great chemistry, by the way. Ryan Reynolds and Marina Baccarin. I think like their relationship is compelling. It's so small, this part of the movie. It was the heart of the last 2 movies, right? And it's just weird to see it get such a back seat in this movie when it's so effective. But again, it's the 3rd movie. You can't do the same thing over and over again. I understand a lot of the reasons why they made these decisions. I just don't. I just feel like if they were hoping for me to experience it in a certain way, I don't know if I landed on it the way that they hoped. Okay, so let's go through the kind of the character beats here. At least the who we didn't really talk about Johnny Storm. We should talk about that, which is to say, it's a great twist and a great example of how you can subvert expectations in a very fun way. Would you say that's fair?
Yes.
Did you, and I think you asked our buddy this last night or Friday night or whatever, but I guess I'll ask the question to you. Did you think it was Captain America at first?
No.
No. You already were on board. You knew that it was going to be Johnny Storm.
Yes.
How did you know? Because you had heard a rumor, or because you had just pieced it together yourself?
There was no rumor on that one. I think that was a tight-lipped one as well.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me.
I just didn't think it made any sense to have. It just doesn't make any sense to have Cap in there.
Yeah, it's like talk about like stepping on people's legacy. That would be a weird way to do it.
Like it did,
Right.
But like so, that's where my mind went to immediately. Like, they're hiding these things. They're using some musical cues. They teased him, I guess, in the beginning of the TVA.
Yeah, that's a great moment, by the way, when it shows the salute and he just stands and he salutes. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
that's so good.
That's the best salute for the TVA in general. Like, I could have just used that one. That's even the one where he he signs his soul over or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Goes and smashes the camera and says "fuck you, Fox" or whatever. I'm going to Disneyland. That's just peak Deadpool right there.
Yeah, no, that's great. I guess again, back to things that I liked. I thought this worked so well because it is the first part of this movie that opens up the wider concepts, right? We were dealing very X-Men heavy, and Wolverine, our history with Deadpool, like dealing with the car salesman thing, his trying to figure out things with his girlfriend, all that stuff, right? And you're really focused in on mutants, right? And then they get sent to the whatever wasteland, and you're like, okay, we know this MCU thing is now brought fully in because we had that TVA sequence. And the first thing they do is subvert your expectations by saying, oh, no, this isn't Cap, it's Johnny Storm from, who he played, which is always, always that fun thing. He's like, oh, he played that character before in 2 movies. And, hit or miss. You can argue that those movies are good or bad. I think they're fine. But it's such a fun, it's just fun. And I have no other way to describe it because I don't think many people expected Chris Evans to come back and ever play Johnny Storm again. And if this is the last time we ever see him do that, perfect, because it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's we get a fun Marvel character dynamic with Pyro, which does kind of suck because you don't get to see a lot of Johnny Storm in the flame on mode, but it's fun to imagine. Okay, well, if you went up against Pyro would win because he can just control the fire, right? Makes sense. So that's a fun kind of dynamic, and then obviously it goes all the way through to the end. Plus, you have the whole weight of Chris Evans having borne been Cap and having that be his kind of legacy at this point. It unravels all that and says, we're not taking this stuff too seriously. And so I think that's why it totally works for me. And then obviously hearing him like swear up a storm, making fun of Cassandra Cain or whatever, was hilarious at the end of the movie. So any other thoughts on the Johnny Storm cameo?
No, I thought it was good, and it even goes back to it for the last
post-credit scene.
So.
Yeah. Well, and I think it gives an opportunity, for Chris Evans, who I think, this is just my perception, has been looking to try to find a way to escape the Cap shadow, right? Do different things, right? He didn't jump into action movies right away, right? He wants to be funny or a bad guy or whatever, right? Think of Knives Out. And so this is an opportunity for him to still continue to play around the MCU. We've seen that he likes doing cameos. Remember, he appears as Loki when he does, I can't remember what, is that in I think that's in Loki, which is that? I don't know, I can't remember. I think he makes another appearance in one of the Loki as a shapeshifter again. Or that might be from is that from Thor 2? I think maybe now I'm thinking about it. Anyway, we've seen him do that kind of stuff and be open to that kind of stuff before. So he gets to continue to play in the MCU and be a completely different other style of character, and it's very funny. So, and His whole thing's like, I didn't say that. I would never. I don't even know what those words mean. Like he's a very good performer and he gets to be really funny and it works. So no no qualms there. I think it's great. And also epic death, like just really rough. Not great. Ooh. Um, what did you? We talked about a little bit about this as well off air, but the scene with Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan, Deadpool's interviewing for the Avengers. Where do you come down on that?
It was cool. Like I mean, it was a nice little surprise and a nice little like kind of introduction into Deadpool and the Avengers. But I remember we were discussing like it just seemed like his acting was a bit off for certain
Favreau's?
yeah, for certain responses or lines, but that could be pickups or reshoots
Sure.
or whatever. But I think it worked. It was funny. It was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really found Happy Hogan to be that interesting of a character in the MCU, to be honest. Anyway, that being said, it's confusing to me. That happens early in the movie, and this is one of those things where it's like, don't think about it too hard, but like, I have to ask this question. It happens early in the movie before he gets abducted by the TVA, right? So, are the Avengers with Happy Hogan and the characters that we know fairly well, are they in Deadpool's universe, which I thought was also the X-Men universe? Are we supposed to be led to believe that?
Couldn't tell you.
Okay. I think that's what is happening there, right? He's like, "Oh, I led X-Force." Very funny joke. They're all dead. But I guess it doesn't. Ultimately doesn't matter. But it's fun to think about. One of the things that they talked about going into this movie, Jeremy, was that, and maybe they isn't the right. People talked about this. People were like, "Okay, Deadpool Wolverine's got it. It's going to save the MCU." First of all, what do you think they meant by that? And second of all, do you think that that's what happened here?
What they meant by that, I think it's just that conversation of fatigue. So it's just people pointing that out, and those people know that this is a super hyped movie. It has every reason to be. Deadpool 1 and 2 were great. Record numbers for R-rated movies, received well, money, all that stuff. And then Hugh Jackman. So I think it's just kind of all of that. People just kind of, being Captain Obvious is to a certain degree. And then in terms of did it succeed, in our small circle, like everyone really enjoyed it. They were even saying that's like the best MCU movie they've seen in a while, or if not the
Baffling to
best.
me, but I get it.
You remember that conversation being had
Yes.
though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, but I just think that's a testament to just the flow of the movie and just everything thrown at everybody and everything basically landing. And then we're just sitting here just with a little bit different expectations in terms of maybe Hugh Jackman and like X-Men and whatnot. Um, and I think that's where we land on the differences.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I never really understood what they meant by save the MCU, other than like maybe save it from sliding further down, right? If you acknowledge that
Right.
it was in a slide, does
It makes
this
you want to,
stop the slide?
if it succeeds, it makes you want to pay attention more, right? It's, certain
But does
films
it?
and
Like that's what.
movies.
But because that's how I kind of thought about it originally. Was like, to save the MCU, you need to get people excited about every movie again, or at least most of them.
Yeah, I don't think you could really like achieve that. I think they know it's an MCU movie. They poked fun at all certain elements, brought back a bunch of different actors, and it gave them that same sense of like, oh, this is awesome to be in the theater. I'm forgetting about my life. This is fun. This is sweet. I'm glad I did this. It's record breaking currently right now. Everyone's seeing
Yeah,
it, word of
actually,
mouth, all that.
I have that
So I think
actually.
it's that feeling like, okay, like even for me, like I bought the tickets when they were available. That's why I had two showings to
Right.
getting with good seats to begin with, because I was like, okay, I want to secure my viewing, my experience, because this is the only Marvel movie this year. That's for a reason. We're in a low point, in their timeline, as they say.
Mm.
So it was just the right movie at the right time, and that's where the term save the MCU comes from. And Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool is just so good. It's just so
Yeah,
based, peak.
sure.
all that stuff that he just knocks out of the park with when how he pokes fun at the current state of things and him just kind of mosey on into this universe. It all just makes perfect sense and it's fun and like let's keep going. Like we know we're in good hands
But
here,
like
basically.
again, I think I agree with you in concept, but I don't think that's what the movie. I don't think that's what happens here.
Mm.
I think this succeeds in being a really great Deadpool movie that
Right.
features Wolverine, right? It uses some MCU trappings, but like as far as actual MCU stuff and or MCU implications, few and far between. All the cameos
Yeah,
are from non MCU
I think
characters.
what you're doing, like when you analyze it like that, for sure. But again, it comes down to that feeling. Like you know you're in good hands when you're in the theater and you're feeling all these feels, laughter,
Right.
whatever, and you see all these familiar faces, and like it just the culmination of all that, the mixture of it, it's doing good for people, and in that way it succeeds because now we can kind of just sit back, wait for Marvel to reveal their next big thing, and
Well, and that
we'll
happened
see
yesterday.
Deadpool. Yeah, I mean they
Yeah.
start filming right away, I guess. Weird.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like I was. Here's what we talk about this maybe more than we've ever talked about anything else, which is, and I try to live my life this way, but it's hard, which is to divorce yourself from expectations, which sounds very like
Well,
hoity-toity or
I
whatever.
try
But
to live my life a quarter mile at a time.
would you like a Corona? Um, uh, to divorce yourself from expectations, and what I mean by that is about movies specifically, which is to say, and I was having this conversation with Star Wars fans because it's become an epidemic in the Star Wars fandom, but not to meet the work where it's at, not where you wanted it to be, right? You know, if you come into Deadpool and Wolverine thinking it has to save the MCU and it needs to set up the next big thing or establish the X-Men or all these things, it doesn't do those things. So and not to say that I was expecting all those things to happen. I'm not saying that, but I did have a little bit. I think my expectations were a little bit higher in terms of the implications on the MCU itself, right? And then there not really being any is a disappointment. That being said, it kind of in the second watch that disappears because it's just fun. But in general, you know, if you can just say, okay, what's the movie trying to achieve, right? Does it achieve that? Yes or no? You're gonna have a good time, right? Unless it's a complete flop.
Yeah, that's what I've been telling people. It's like, is it good? What are you ranking? It's like it's so hard to like just lay out those expectations for someone. You know what I mean? It's like I basically all I said was honestly, it's super entertaining. You're gonna have a good time. You're not gonna regret it. Like you should go see this
Sure.
movie, see it soon because you don't want to be spoiled because some of those cameos are
Oh
it's
yeah, no,
really shocking.
absolutely, yeah,
So
100%.
in
And
an
the internet is
entertaining
not a
way.
kind place.
Right.
Like, what are you, the internet?
Oh, great.
The
Yeah.
great line. Yeah, and like, I guess for me, what I'm saying is that those expectations were slightly unfair because I don't think that Marvel ever said that Deadpool and Wolverine is going to save the MCU,
Mhm.
right? I think that was a sentiment coming from the fandom, who desperately wanted something to save the MCU, right? They didn't want to see the MCU go the way of the Western, right? Which I think every comic book fan is somewhere in the back of their mind a little bit worried that the bubble's going to burst at some point and it's all going to be over, right? And that day yet may come. But for now, I think we're just like, let's hold on to the stuff that we like for as long as we can, right? So that expectation, I think, is maybe a little unfair. So if you just say, okay, well, what was the movie trying to accomplish, right? Yes, he was trying to introduce Deadpool into the MCU, although it does seem like he goes back to his regular world at the end of this movie and not into the MCU. So that's also a little confusing. But if you just look at what the movie's trying to do, which is trying to, wrap up, put a bow on a Deadpool trilogy, kind of leverage the Wolverine concept as much as possible for entertainment purposes. Throw in a fun, play with the variance concept in a fun way, and that's basically it. They nail it. They nail it, right? If you try to attach any kind of greater universe impacting concepts on top of it, is not really it's not really gonna fly. You're not gonna get that here. So anyway, that's I think that's a discussion for like how we go into movies, because I think this is the reverse example. Was, by the way, we talked about this earlier. The Marvels. People expect that movie to suck balls, like just be absolutely trash. It's not that bad, but it had really no chance of succeeding because the expectations against it were so high. You would think that low expectations might mean that people are going to come out pleasantly surprised, but it doesn't exactly work that way. I don't think. I think if you sometimes when there's a pylon, you know, and I think that Marvels is a great example of that. When there's a pylon of like, this is gonna suck, we're not interested, yada yada yada. It doesn't really stand a chance because it just gets lost in the shuffle and diluted. So, it is what it is. Is there anything we're missing and we haven't talked about?
Oh, the movie?
Yeah. Oh, we talk about the Henry Cavill of it all.
Yeah, that's just another cameo. That one's a super fun, out of nowhere, wild, shocking cameo where it's like it's not a cameo to like show you like, to me at least, like the possibility. It's not a realistic possibility.
No.
It's literally just poking fun at the movie industry
Or the
and
fan casting,
expectations and
right?
yeah, all of that as a whole. So I love how they're able to get that in there, and it was kind of cool looking, and especially with the Mission Impossible meta reference.
The
with
the loading of the
loading,
arms
yeah.
is so cool.
Because like, they could have just we got a snicked claw reveal from
Sure.
Henry Cavill's Wolverine. Like, even if you weren't feeling the look or his line delivery or whatever, like it was just super cool to see that action beat, him just be punched through the fucking
You know what his
vortex or whatever.
you know what his his credited title is in the movie?
I don't know,
It's the
motorcycle Logan or
no, the Cavalrine.
oh right, he says that I think in the movie.
Yeah, it's funny though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not going to judge it on like, oh, would he make a good Wolverine or not? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I will say that the loading of the arms is a fun. It's like that's the level of meta jokes that I think you could argue is a layer too deep. I think we've talked about the layers of how meta you can get. I think that one is probably too deep, but because it was like a thing on the internet for so long, it is still funny. And yeah, definitely noticed it the first time too. And like, because it's like, okay, we're gonna do like just to walk through the different like layers of this, which is like, okay, fan casting of Henry Cavill as Wolverine, check, right? We're gonna make fun of that concept. Then we're gonna do the please come work for us. We'll treat you way better than those folks down the street, right? Okay, the dig at DC and that all the shit that went down with Superman. Okay, and then we're gonna reference a movie franchise that has nothing to do with superheroes, just because it was a fun meme on the internet for a short time, which was Henry Cavill reloading his arms in the fight scene in the bathroom with Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, whatever. Which one was that one? Not the most recent one, but the one before that, Fallout.
Rogue Nation or something.
Fallout, which is maybe my favorite Mission Impossible movie, by the way. It's so good. I just think that's like, you got to give props where they're due, because that is high quality stuff, in my opinion. Like, it works. Okay, so where do you want to go next? I think, like, okay, we talked about X-23. Her appearance, Daphne Keene's appearance as Laura X-23, was teased ahead of time, revealed ahead of time, because they wanted to have her at the red carpet, which I think is a very, like, that's a good enough reason to have that happen.
She could go to the red carpet without being in the movie, no?
Well, I think people, it would have given away the reveal.
Well,
they were fine to give it away anyway.
To the days too, I think it's perfectly normal for these companies to kind of throw a couple like big ones out there. You know what I mean? Like, get the conversation rolling even more. because like obviously for us it's like, oh, we didn't need to see that, we're so close, we already got our tickets, but like it was kind of good like knowing that like they made the right decision in terms of like including that part of Logan's history in there,
Mm-hmm.
um, because she was a pretty integral part in kind of just getting him to open up and kind of see who he is and what people meant to him, and what these new people can kind of mean to him. Um, so yeah, I thought her inclusion was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like you talk about like, hey, right at the movie, beginning of the movie, they're like, well, we didn't want to step on the whole Logan thing, but we can't avoid it, so we're just gonna go right into it. And we talked about how that works as a part of the whole skeleton thing. I'm no man of science, but you seem very dead. um, but the X-23 thing is a little different because you're bringing that specific character, and I think we're led to believe that it's that version of like it's her who survived the events of Logan version of X-23, right? Because she's got the sunglasses and all that stuff. But I guess what I'm wondering is, do you feel like that reflects on Logan in any way, like the film Logan in any way, in a negative light? Or is it like, are you able to completely divorce the two?
I could completely divorce the two. I think it's hilarious how people try to be like, this death means nothing now or whatever. It's like, I guess if you just live your life in like this continuous like timeline thing where it all like kind of goes back and forth. Like if you're watching Logan, you're not thinking about Deadpool at all.
Right.
Like how?
Right. You can't be, right? Um, this is a kind of probably comes back to the whole conversation on canon and is like, if you are obsessed with canon, you're obsessed with the wrong thing. This you hear from storytellers a lot of the time. I think a lot of people do get tied up in canon because it feels like a safety blanket. It's like, okay, if this is how it all works and I can lay it all out, the world makes sense to me, right? Um, and they make a joke about how abusive they were of their timeline and the X-Men stuff, but ultimately they did that because they wanted it to serve a story purpose at whatever movie they were telling at the time, right? And obviously it can get a little too confusing if you really are trying to commit to having a canon, trying to commit to that. I think is a noble deed, but when you're talking about like merging the MCU with the Fox stuff and all that stuff, which were not at all thinking about each other when they're being made, it's completely irresponsible in my opinion. So, or maybe not irresponsible is the right word, but it's just it doesn't really track for me. So, no, I don't think. To answer my own question, it doesn't really bother me. That being said, again, it does feel like a bit of a shortcut to say, hey, this isn't the Wolverine from Logan, but sure does look like and sound like and appear to be the same Logan, so we're going to use that as a shortcut, right? And I think that's fair. I think Daphne Keane as a performer is really great. So even though she has like, I don't know, 5 lines dialogue in this movie, they all land. Especially obviously the. By the way, did you notice this, Jeremy? So early in the movie, she walks away. She says, "You were never the right guy," and then it cuts away, right? But in the flashback, like when he's going, his life is flashing before his eyes as we hear Madonna play.
So good.
She says, "You were never the right guy until you were."
Yeah. I heard that. Yeah.
So
First
of all, I guess
the trailer, or was it not? Just the first part.
I think it was just the first part, but like it's just weird to use the like extended bit later when the extended bit didn't happen earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see many like. I just when I like heard the two lines together, I just thought they were such really good lines.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
Like,
It's
I
a great
just think
line,
it's
well
so
said.
well written,
Mm-hmm.
and just perfectly encapsulates Wolverine, and then that Wolverine's particular issue. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because he got no, there was no like resolve with his scenario, but he's in one where he can kind of get that, and it's like it just so happens to be like yeah, you're never the right guy for the job, like, but like that's not you always.
But that's not why we like you or why you're you're
yeah,
important, right?
you always just step up, and like so this was like kind of meant to be almost. So like I really latched onto that whole notion, And I think that's kind of like the heart of like the whole Hugh Jackman thing, like just really doubling down and showcasing, who Wolverine is, but he gets to
Yeah.
have this fun, unleashed, Wolverine experience. Whereas we were kind of we're just so used to seeing him be like the lead. You know what I mean? Like it's the Hugh
Mm,
Jackman show. He's the X Man.
right.
The original trilogy plus multiple, it's all about him. Even Days of Future Past, like just such an iconic portrayal. So I think those expectations kind of did us in a little bit, but I'm very happy I saw it a second time to kind of just relish in the nostalgia and just like the importance of his character and legacy, and like just the elation towards the end for both characters. I just think is it's just so much fun. And yeah, it can come down to friendship or whatever, but I think you're right. Like there weren't these like moments where they could really trust one another, or like go battle for one another for a particular reason. It was just their character banter and how opposites they are, but they come together in the end through all that other stuff we said, which is the heart of the movie.
Yeah, I think one thing that we should probably mention, or I want to mention because I sound more negative on this than I think maybe I'd like to, which is to say, I think there was a acknowledgement from Hugh Jackman, either and you can tell me if he says this specifically in interviews or not because you watch them all, or if this was more metatextual in how this all comes together and why he's in this movie in the first place and all that stuff. But that there is a genuine love for the character that he has for it, right? That and an element of it that I think he understands, which is that he never really got to do all the stuff with the character, right? You got to do some really cool stuff, right? Um, and some better than worse, but it was kind of all within that Marvel or I would say Marvel and Sony. Neither of those are right. The Fox X-Men universe, and under those trappings and that version of the character. Understanding that's different from the comic book version that we know, and they even make fun of the short version and stuff like that in this movie, which is funny. But that there was just a desire from Hugh Jackman, and it comes through on the screen, in my opinion, to really indulge the fandom in the iconography and the more comic traditional version of the character that he never really got to do, and just be a part of that fun side of it. And I think that really comes through, and I really appreciate that as like a, hey, I am this character for all intents and purposes. What is it, 25 years now, something crazy like that, um that he's been playing this character. He's informed the character probably almost as much as the character's been informed him at this point. But be able to like strap on the claws and like put on the yellow and blue, it does have some meaning to me as a fan of someone who has wanted to see Wolverine wear that costume on the screen, right? And we got to see like not just that one, but we got to see the orange and brown. We got to see the one where his hands cut off. I don't remember what that one is. We obviously got to see the short version of him, like a bunch of stuff, right? So it was really cool to just step outside the film critic bubble for a second and just say, wasn't it cool to see Hugh Jackman wear the yellow and blue costume next to Deadpool? Yeah, pretty fucking cool. No, like,
Yeah,
no
and the
doubt.
brown suit with the Hulk
Yeah,
kind of thing. It's like,
yeah.
yeah,
The Hulk
sweet.
and the Hulk, even though you don't see him fully, it's like that's cool as hell, right? Um, like literally no problem at all. Like you have to imagine he got ripped in half or something in that scenario or whatever. But it's funny to think about. So I, and again we have our issues with the cowl itself. I don't. I'm. Here's the question, Jeremy. Do you think it's genuinely possible to make the cowl Wolverine's cowl, right? Because they mentioned Batman, which we've seen work. Um, is it possible to make Wolverine's cowl work in live action, or is it too weird looking?
Yeah, well, I think it works in certain angles and shots of this movie.
Right.
The reveal scene does not necessarily work, but then the very second shot where they go to like the side of his head and they focus
Yeah.
more on like Deadpool like doing his thing, the blowjob handles or whatever.
Yeah.
It looks phenomenal when they're in the underground base there with the MacGuffin in the dark, kind of shadowy
Sure.
area, and they're talking. And he has these great lines. It looked great there. Um, yeah, and then it's like it's just like weird. Like he gets the full suit, but then he loses sleeves and he loses like the shoulder pads as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they should have kept the shoulder pads on the shoulders to kind of like
Like,
balance out like the
yeah,
wind,
I agree with that.
the wide, because the head looks larger now than the body
Yeah.
almost, even though the suit is well designed with like this kind of like almost like a football shoulder pads kind
Yeah.
of thing to it, but like it's almost like disguised a little bit, like not as bulky. So I think there's little tweaks here and there they could have done, but like uh still phenomenal. We got that huge like one shot scene of them just tearing up all those Deadpools. But then yeah, they end it with that pure CG Jackman like jumping out of the window,
Oh yeah,
and
of the
then
bus. Yeah.
and then I remember him, and then him just standing there and bouncing up and down like he's completely fake. Like in my head, I'm watching the movie the very first time, and I'm repeating over and over again
In
as
your head,
fast
you're
as
like,
I can.
he's fake.
Completely
He's fake.
He's
That's not
completely
fake. That's
Like, you know
not
what I mean?
real.
Like it's like
Yeah.
these are the things like with my point of view, it just kind of takes me out completely. The second time though, I kind of wasn't in on that like layer. I was like just kind of accepting the imagery and everything going on
Yeah, I
for
was
what
kind
it
of just like
was, and
looking
I
at
was
it
like,
as a
this is
tableau,
amazing.
right? Like, how does this work as like a splash page or
Right.
whatever? Like it, like that works then, in that scenario. But it doesn't look great, which is part of the problem, right?
And they
Like,
discussed too the eyes, right? Like it's cool that it's very similar to Deadpool, like the white,
yeah, the emissive
bulbous
eyes. Yeah,
eyes. But I think we were saying that if they were just a bit more expressive or slanted or
they need to be.
squintier,
Yeah, they
something like that.
they're exactly the same round shape as Deadpool's, and they need to be a different shape, and they need to be moving more. Like,
Mhm.
there just needs to be a little bit more. If you're gonna do that, they have to
Right.
be as emotive as like Spider-Man's are
Right.
and stuff like that. So I think there's just
But
like
then
a few
also
things they could tweak and learn.
this is all through the lens of Deadpool as well. You know what I mean? Like even though it's the Wolverine suit from like his movies, like what's the tone of those compared to Deadpool's tone?
Mm.
So like if it's through like Deadpool's percent, like wouldn't he want the eyes to just be exactly like his, or like doesn't that make sense like within
Yeah, I
the
guess.
context
I
of
feel
this
like that
world?
that feels like a bit of a stretch to me.
Yeah.
It just like the question I think ultimately that's most important is, does it work? And it's like
Yeah.
sometimes. The answer is sometimes. It works. Yeah, not all not all of it. And it's like, I think this leads into another good question, and maybe we can wrap up this Deadpool stuff in, which is are we going to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine again? And if so, will he be wearing the cowl, and will it be improved?
It will for sure be improved. There is massive potential for him coming back again. This movie is obviously record breaking,
Right.
regardless of reviews.
By the way,
or
hold on,
whatever.
quick
But even
pause.
audience, what's that?
The $438 million
Alright, yeah,
worldwide.
I think it's like number 6. I think in the ranking. So it cracked
Biggest
the top 10.
R-rated opening of all time, 8th biggest domestic opening of all
Okay, so
time.
yeah, so it's a success. It's a major success. And then with we'll talk about, we'll do a brief Comic-Con thing, but just teasing what happened there, like with Robert Downey Jr. kind of coming back to Marvel in a way, and then even with Chris Evans and some other cameos within this one, it's like it really just kind of like puts to bed the conversation of like all the Avengers like not coming back or whatever. Like it's pretty clear that that's probably the case, and if that's the case, what are they doing with Spider-Man? And then Hugh Jackman always wanted to be across from Toby and RDJ, and then this project I'm sure reinvigorates his passion for the character. And I think whatever comes next just makes this movie better, and whatever next is better, because we don't need to kind of do a whole like reintroducing or kind of catch up. It's like you got Unleashed Wolverine before, who showed up. You know what I mean? It was a different Wolverine, whatever, but he showed up and he did the right thing. And then he's just gonna be back with his team, his family, whether it's Halle Berry or whatever, like OG X-Men. And then we go to a place where we
I like that your mind went to Halle Berry first, though. To be honest.
Yeah, bring back Storm.
Right. No, I'm not
Halle
disagreeing.
Berry?
I think
Come on.
What happens to a frog when it gets struck by lightning? Same thing as
But, like,
everything else.
She's definitely iconic as Storm. Like even though she didn't get too much to chew on.
100%. No doubt. No disagreeing.
Yeah.
I just know you're a big like Scott Summers guy,
Right.
So
Huge
I thought that
Cyclops
you'd go
fan.
there first.
Cemented in the year Cyclops this year as well with X-Men '97.
The year they did,
And even the video games, right? The new video game Capcom versus Marvel.
Marvel. There's like a collection that just came out.
Yeah, it's like
Marvel versus
8.
Capcom
I don't know if
collection.
it's out yet, but it's like all the games in the series are all in one
with all the
package.
DLC and like it's with like a training mode and stuff. Apparently, it sounds really cool.
There's so many games there that we just never had as kids, which is just baffling.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole X-Men Children of the Atom. It's just an X-Men fighting game. It's like why did we not have that, in our hands when we were kids? But now
well, because they were at the arcade, and
well, I think some of them are on PS1.
Well, that's true. I also never had a PS1. That was a blind spot for me. But like there was a lot of stuff that was in arcades, and there was not a lot of arcade action.
Yeah.
Like,
anyways, like the two like leaders is like Ryu and Cyclops, kind of like they're like the kind of two leads on both sides. They kind of made that franchise of. And there's like new artwork of them like doing cool handshakes and stuff. So
that's dope. So plus you could fight as like Leon Kennedy versus Cyclops. It would be like it's a dream come true for you. Yeah. So you think he'll be back? You mentioned Secret Wars when we were chatting offline. You think that's where we'll see him again, most recently, or the next time we see him?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's just so much Marvel planning. We're getting a move before that, right? With Doomsday in particular, right? So,
right.
And that's obviously going to play off variants of Tony Stark, I'd imagine.
So let's wrap up with this because I forgot to mention it. The nice pool stuff.
Oh right. Yeah,
do you think that it works for you? It's just Ryan Reynolds basically.
I think it worked better in our second view. I think there was way more laughter on him on the second one.
Yeah.
But yeah, how can you not like that performance? It's just so innocent, so out of nowhere.
I love the '90s inspired costume.
Yeah.
It feels like it's out of those.
They play off each other, and it's Ryan Reynolds hating the nice version of himself. Like I think it's great. The whole dog pool in between the both of them. The papa.
Right. Yeah. He should be able to decide who is his own papa.
Yeah. It's great.
No, it's all good. The gold-plated pistoleros, everything. Yeah. Like, yeah. It's funny.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
To me, it feels a little bit like a speed bump, pacing-wise. Yeah.
I would say the dog pool feels like a speed bump. I'm like,
well, he's kind of like
dog.
The dog and him are like intertwined, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But it's like if it was just the dog and not him, I would be like, okay, I'm going to the washroom, or like, do you guys need anything? Like, I was like, how long are these slow-mo dog running sequences? We get it. This dog is super ugly, but it's cute. But yeah, I actually think that might be, I think behind Channing Tatum, that might be up there with some of the funniest bits.
Yeah, and like the death sequence is actually pretty funny. He's like, how long do you regenerate? He's like, regenerate.
I think I'm hit.
It's just so much blood. It's good.
And then Logan just doing the whole like you're a murderer type thing.
Yeah.
Right. He did it with Johnny Storm, and I was doing it with this guy.
Yes. That might be my like high on the list. I was gonna say my favorite, but high on the list of like running gags throughout the movie. Yeah. Like you murdered him. Yeah, it's good. Okay, I just wanted to check where you landed on that. Okay, I think
his little run is just so funny.
Yeah. People said that. Okay, here's another question then for you. There's been some buzz around this movie looking cheap. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think the cinematographer isn't super top notch. I think I saw like a spread of all of the the movies he's done, and it's just like nothing really jumps out. Because like we're just in a day and age in this digital age where like I don't know. It's like the colors aren't really in the focus. Because it's like these characters just kind of pop up. They're all colorful costumes, all this shit, and they just kind of.
Well, then they mute them down. Yeah.
It's like, how do you make the Void look? They made it look whitish, Mad Maxy. I don't know.
Yeah, but that except only in that one part of the Void, because when they're chatting with,
it's like desert.
Nice Pool. It's they're like standing in a field. and like the way that they make it, like, oh, this is the void. They just put random bits of
Well,
junk
they had
flying
they had a
around.
couple like scenes of the van driving from different locations within the void.
Yeah, and yeah, to be honest, if I'm being honest, the Honda Odyssey joke doesn't really work for me, but that's fine.
Well, it's
Not every
like
joke has to
we've
work.
already kind of like culturally made fun of minivans. You know what I mean? To
It's
where
like
it's
it's
like
not funny
it's
anymore.
not
Yeah,
new,
yeah.
but it kind of works when he changes his mind because we get this crazy like fight sequence within the van,
In the van, yeah.
and he says it, and like I think that joke lines or lands.
Um,
But yeah,
in terms of like, uh, I guess appearances of disappoint. Sabretooth's appearance is disappointing.
it's fine.
I
He
would
doesn't really
argue.
need too much time.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have a single line
It's
of
the
dialogue.
yeah, he does. He says, "I remember you."
Oh, is that what he says? Okay.
Yeah. And like I
Um,
knew that that was gonna happen from the trailer because they run so fast at one another, and like they cut right like when he's about to take a swipe, and it's like clearly he's gonna just like
take his head right off.
yeah, or
The
like
the
try
joke
him.
following it, where they make fun of Furiosa, is
Great,
hilarious.
yeah, and it's so like
Yeah.
so recent too.
Yes, yes.
Like the movie came out what, like in a matter of months before, so
Yeah, no, it's great.
that's pretty sweet.
I have the skull of your leader, Furiosa.
But then there was a lot of like gender bending too, or something like that.
Oh yeah, because
Those,
he says that he
those ones
doesn't.
didn't land for me.
He
I
says
was
he
like,
he
what?
keeps
Like,
calling him her and her him.
yeah.
He's like, I don't. There's a line about like how he like acknowledges it, but like I feel like it would have been funnier if he never acknowledged it. If I'm being honest.
There, yeah, I was like, yeah, I agree with that.
I'm trying to think if there's any other. There's so many though. Like Pyro as a character, he's played by Aaron Stanford, same
Yeah, he gets a
actor.
lot to chew on.
He gets a lot to chew on. You didn't like his voice. I think that's just his regular voice.
It's not his regular voice.
I think it is.
It's not. I watched him in interviews as well.
Okay. Is he British or something?
No, he's American.
Okay.
He just sounded more weasel. No, I didn't say I didn't like it. I said it was cool that he changed it up. It's like very weaselly and like, yeah, it was
less
fun. It was
annoying.
cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Or maybe more annoying, but
I will say, it's hard to say. So Emma Corrin plays Cassandra Nova. I think she's actually pretty great, right?
Brilliant.
And like the way that they introduced her from
Amazing.
behind, like perfect head shape
Yeah.
for Professor
but
X.
just one of the most just kind of like you know what it is, right? She's kind of like this side villain, but ends up being the main villain.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But yeah, just her whole explanation or whatever was just so well done. Like how she just wanted to be just the void to exist, and she's just gonna fuck shit up basically.
Yep. It's
You just truly believe it, and she's like kind of like, oh, I saw one interview where like when Ryan and them told she got it, like they basically said like we want you to be like this, and this, but like also like lovable, like in a weird way, or like
Sure.
super likable. And I think that all that kind of comes through because like you can't really like you don't falter too much for like the position she's kind of been put in, specifically with like her origin story of being in the womb and like you know
Mm-hmm.
basically almost dying and stuff like that. So yeah, I thought she was great. I could have just used her and not the TVA like kind of like whole thing.
Well,
The
it's only
TVA thing
because
towards the end was brutal for me, like with the whole like that
like the
chick
MacGuffin.
like liking no like the chick like
Oh,
being
you
into
didn't.
Peter or whatever, and like this whole like new layer of the TVA coming down on the other guy of the TVA.
You didn't
It
like that?
was
That wasn't
no,
working
just
for
like
you.
it's too much.
It
of
works for me because I have the history with
right.
she's from the show.
Okay, yeah.
There's
yeah.
a whole thing there, so that works for me. And it's just because it's so short. It's like mostly a throwaway. I think the TVA stuff is explained enough in this movie that you don't have to have seen any of the Deadpool stuff. Although, or sorry, the Loki stuff. I would say though, if you had seen the Loki stuff, it does make this feel a little bit. It does get a little bit of extra heft to it. And I was gonna say, oh yeah, the last couple things. So we had like the all the Deadpools. So you got a whole bunch of different Deadpool core people in there. So Matthew McConaughey plays Cowboy Pool. You have Nathan Fillion who plays Head Pool. He's the floating head one. Blake Lively plays Lady Deadpool.
Yeah, none of that really comes through. So
no,
whatever.
no. It's just a fun thing to mention.
And gives them a reason
Shatterstar's in this movie
to have a huge action sequence and to fuck shit up together. So.
Yeah, and again, it's a bunch of characters who can regenerate anyway, so you can like bring him in and out. Yeah, exactly.
How come you don't have a mask? just
They
like
just
points at
like
his
the
face.
points at his face.
Like people don't
Yeah.
laugh too hard at that. But I thought that was
That's
so
a good.
funny.
It's a good joke. I think it works. But I will say, Professor X, Xavier, Charles, Chuck, as they call him,
Mm.
does have a lot of like his presence is felt in this movie. Like,
Oh yeah, that's another major part of the Hugh Jackman character and Cassandra. Like those two
yeah,
kind of like working or working against each other or whatever, and like kind of kind of reminiscent of like a Professor X, kind of like in the '97, how he's like in Magneto's mind, and they're kind of
yeah,
like going over like whatever existential crisis or whatever, and it's like kind of like a a battling of the minds and narratives and whatnot. uh, I thought that was cool, seeing like a reverse of Wolverine kind of being the teacher, kind of accepting like the wild student or whatever in that
yeah. He's like,
scenario.
Charles would never want me to like
Yeah,
abandon you or whatever, and like that comes through. I just think it's interesting to have the weight of Charles Xavier have play such a role in this movie
right.
without him ever being in it. It's just interesting.
True, but it is like a twin sibling, and
Yeah.
they're so bound to one another
Well, they look
through
the
that narrative.
same. There's no reason that she would have an English accent, by the way,
Right.
other than that Charles had an English accent. So it's like, okay, that works. But it's just funny. And like I think I also liked the visualization of her powers, like the sticking her fingers into their face. It was
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
to tell if that was something that people could see, or if that was just something that was happening, like felt like was happening inside someone's head. It doesn't really
I
matter.
think
It looks
people
really
could
cool.
see.
Okay,
Yeah,
like okay,
like dragging the TVA agent into the subway station.
yeah. Okay, fair enough. It's pretty cool though. And also, by the way, speaking of which, we should mention that Mr. Paradox, played by Matthew McFadden, very funny,
Yeah, funny guy.
very funny.
Just a little too much, but yeah.
It's just like he's just a generic villain, you know. And I guess in this, for a movie like this, there's just so much going on already. Like to have a villain with like these really deep motivations and all that stuff, and like that was part of my complaint earlier, that we don't have a lot of characters, including the villain here. Not really much of a character, but very funny. Like the line delivery is very dry. Like when you cut back to him and he's like mouthing along with the "oh, this is what it feels like."
Yeah, like it's
Logan,
just-
it's like
yeah,
that's funny shit.
Yeah, it's like a typical villain, but he's like, they're like, we're gonna have a lot of fun with him by just being kind of like cutesy and smart.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I think that will do it for Deadpool. So here's the plan for those who might be watching live. Stay tuned, because we are going to be back pretty soon. We're going to talk about Marvel at Hall H, which happened last night. It's a good segue off the conversation we're coming in here. You want to know about the future of Marvel's going to be? Certainly Deadpool didn't tell you. So we'll get it from Kevin Feige himself. So I was just going to say Kevin, and I didn't think that was appropriate. So I had to make sure I added his last name.
Kev Dog.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. It'll be just a bonus episode for the main feed. So if you're just a podcast listener, check for that on your main feed. Okay, until then, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/TowerBabblecast. Head over to our website, towerofbabble.ca. You can find everything we do, including the small screen Star Wars and everything else. Help support the show, patreon.com/TowerBabblecast. Again, this month, we're doing Twister. That'll be out soon. And then in which case, we'll reveal what we're doing for the month of August. That's Jeremy's pick, so Jeremy, got to start thinking about that. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and of course, by the way, as a Patreon subscriber, you do get access to the Discord, and we encourage you and all of our patrons to, chop it up, chat it up in the Discord, especially when these big movies come out. It's fun to talk about it. Okay, well, we'll be back very soon, but until then, I was going to say that maybe the Force be with you, because I'm stuck in Star Wars mode, but what's a good Deadpool line? Maximum effort? Maximum effort. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.